I'm Matt.
Hey, I'm Steve.
Hey, I'm John.
This is the Sober Friends Podcast. We're here for the sober curious, the new guy, and the old timer. Here to talk about the stuff anyone looking to live alcohol-free has to face day to day, and how we overcame those struggles. We speak for no 12-step group, but we do try to remain anonymous. You're not alone. This is the Sober Friends Podcast. Women in recovery, or women who are sober, women who don't drink, are important because we don't get enough of their voice. And what's also important is hearing different ways to being alcohol free. And I got a great guest tonight. I have Katie Campbell. Katie is, here's where I am, not prepared for your Twitter account. Mindful Constitution.
Correct.
Did I remember that correctly? All right.
Yeah.
She's at Mindful Constitution. She has an awesome page where I was just telling her I saw her like professional video for her coaching where she is like so professional and then she's a goofball online. And it's like two different people.
On TikTok.
I like the goofball.
I'm unhinged on TikTok.
Yeah.
I also happen to have the most followers on TikTok, so I think there's some correlation.
Yeah, that's what people want. They want goofballs.
That's what the people want.
Katie, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's exciting.
So your podcast is called The Mindful Constitution. It's on Spotify.
Mm-hmm.
You do a little bit more than just alcohol-free stuff. Women's health, holistic.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to, I don't know, how do we kick this off? Where would you want to start on where your journey is?
Oh gosh. Well, I guess just to kind of outline, I guess it makes sense to outline what I do and then I'll share how I got
Sure.
there. Does that work for you?
It works for me.
So what do I do? Well, I operate as a board certified holistic health and wellness coach, but my background is in health and counseling psychology. I went to undergrad for that at Emmanuel College in Boston. So needless to say, going to college in a big drinking city, I did drink a lot during that time. I then went on to do my master's in nutrition and root cause healing and functional medicine, also known as functional medicine. And from there, I was still feeling a little confused about exactly how I wanted to approach like what I wanted to do with the certification. I always felt like a little more alternative. I didn't really see myself in a clinical setting. And so, yeah, so I went on and ended up doing like a health coaching, holistic health and wellness coaching program through IIN, and went on to become board certified. And I also am certified in breathwork and meditation. And so it's kind of hard to like even separate the stories of my education and my sober curious journey, but I guess I'll share my sober curious journey to highlight, how I got to my niche of sober curiosity, which is what I do now. Presently, I work with women who are gray area drinkers or just women who are sober curious. I work with a lot of highly sensitive women, empathic women, women who are deep feelers that maybe use alcohol to self-medicate. I really don't work with people who are physically dependent. So it's kind of everyone up until physical dependency, experiencing a desire just to step away from alcohol to lead their most vibrant, healthy lives, or maybe they are having problematic effects or side effects from their drinking, and it's starting to impact their lives in a negative way, all the way to clients who are kind of brinking on physical dependency, but maybe not quite cross the threshold. So I have a big variety of clients across the drinking spectrum, and I help them to build a life they don't need alcohol to escape. I help them to tap into their gifts, which I find many highly sensitive, empathic women really have a lot of light to share. And sometimes we self-medicate with alcohol because we are sensitive and we are empathic and we don't the world is a little overstimulating and overwhelming, or maybe we've created lives in accordance to programming and societal conditioning that doesn't really align with our soul and our spirit. And so we use alcohol to kind of fit in and cope with that. And I know that's what I did. And so I really took my own journey through sober curiosity into sobriety and kind of molded that into the coaching that I do. I also built a yurt in my yard this past spring, and I do monthly Sober Curious circles in person where
That's
we do.
awesome.
Yeah, it's so awesome. I love it. They've been it's so cool too. They're full every month. People are so into it. And there's so many people out there that are exploring their relationship to alcohol and realizing like I don't need to have a problem to actually benefit so much from cutting back on drinking or not
Yes.
drinking at all. And the conglomeration of like sober curious women with sober women is such an inspiring combo, because you have these women who are just starting to explore their relationship to alcohol that would probably never set foot in an AA meeting, getting
Mm-hmm.
exposed to people with years and years and years of sobriety, and they get to share wisdom with each other. We do breath work and meditation and workshopping. This next circle in February is going to be dedicated to self-love and worthiness along our sober curious path. So, and then I do the meditation and breath work around that as well. So yeah, my background's very holistic. I now work one-on-one, do the yurts, I do virtual meetups, the podcast. But I guess to kind of go back a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
my own journey with alcohol and how I got here today is that I was always kind of a binge drinker. Um, we were talking prior to the call about
Yep.
underlying trauma, and that shaping our kind of like predisposition to a problematic relationship with alcohol. So definitely had some traumatic events in childhood. My
Me
family
too.
went, yeah, who hasn't? Had a high ACE score, directly correlated to a problematic relationship with alcohol or increased likelihood of drinking.
It's
Uh,
funny you said that. I just took an ACE test.
yeah,
There is somebody who asked me to take that, an ADHD thing. And as I'm taking it, I'm like, I don't know how this is scored. I don't know what like good or bad is, but I'm just looking here and I'm probably scoring ones versus zeros more than I should. This
you're
is
like,
kind of telling me I'm in the right place
I
for,
understand why I'm an alcoholic.
yes.
Yeah, so there's definitely some traumatic events. I actually, my family was actually hit by a drunk driver when I was a baby. In Mexico. We grew up in San Diego, or I grew up there before we moved to the East Coast when I was like in middle
What
school.
would, as an aside, what would take you from like the most beautiful place on earth to here?
You know how many people have asked me that? I'm kind of over California, honestly. Even though
Well, I'm over Connecticut, so join
yeah,
the club.
like I've been here most of my life, and I kind of appreciate the like balance in my personality that a childhood in San Diego gave me with a like adolescence and adulthood in the crusty Northeast. I feel like I embody the like combination of like a sunny California personality, but I have the edge. I have the masshole edge. If you'll get it. So it's like good. It's a balance, like everything. Um, but yeah, so anyways, we had some traumatic events that like kind of shaped my upbringing. And it kind of led to my mom struggling with alcoholism. So I saw firsthand like her alcohol abuse, and then, I never really thought much of it. I always kind of disregarded my childhood trauma, especially because I was a baby and I couldn't remember like the car accident or the aftermath. My dad passed away. My brother passed away. My other brother suffered a serious brain injury and was handicapped.
Oh, so did they pass in the accident?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so it was a really traumatic like event for our family. It was really like a bomb went off.
Physically and emotionally. It's physical harm and then the
Yeah.
emotion of losing people.
Yeah, so it definitely was kind of like a shock wave for our family at the time. And like my sisters, one was in the car and one wasn't, but like still struggle with substance use problems. And I think that's a big part of it, like having gone through that whole experience. And my mom did. And so I grew up like in the aftermath of that and kind of like shoved any thought of reflecting on how that could have impacted me beneath, life, and thinking I was a baby. This is just how it's always been, whatever. And then I went on. I was always like a binge drinker in high school. I started drinking at 14. I grew up on Martha's Vineyard. So it's a seasonal vacation destination, and you're around so much binge drinking. It's just completely normalized. I grew up working in the hospitality.
If you don't know the East Coast,
Yeah.
like I think the only place that might be more beautiful is Nantucket. Like Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket kind of go hand in hand.
Mm.
It's a privileged place to be.
Yeah.
You're underselling it. It's a wonderful place to be, and you enhance it even more at sunset by having a glass of wine.
Right. Like everyone is on vacation mode, and
Hmm.
it's funny because everyone growing up, they're like, "Oh, so you're rich. You're from Martha's Vineyard." I'm like, "No, no, honey. The people that live there year round are not rich. We just serve the rich people." So I worked in hospitality growing up from a really young age, which is, great for character building, but also very heavy drinking culture,
Hmm.
and just being around people on vacation all the time. And then the winters were like very quiet, and drinking is like the only thing to do, and that's what everyone does. And so then I went to college in Boston and I continued my binge drinking. And that was when I was getting my undergrad in psychology. And then I backpacked for like 5 years and traveled and blacked out all over the world. And then I decided I wanted to get serious about like going back to school. And that was when I went for my functional medicine and nutrition master's program. And that was really when the lack of alignment between my drinking and what I was learning about started to reveal itself. And it was really like the cognitive dissonance was getting really uncomfortable, just having dreams of helping people or in whatever way I really didn't know at the time. I was like, I know I want to have like a purposeful, meaningful life where I like have impact and I'm helping people, and I'm going to school for health and wellness and root cause healing and all this stuff, and I'm binge drinking every weekend and during the week, and my shift drinks after work that ended up being many shift drinks after work. So yeah, the cognitive dissonance started arising. I started feeling a lot of imposter syndrome, like how am I ever really going to help people if this is like how I'm living my own life? I felt like
That
I
was
always
conscious enough in your brain at that point.
Yeah, it was surfacing during my
Yeah.
master's program for sure. I actually did like some dry months, like in the peak of my binge drinking, and
Yep.
I remember feeling like really good, um, and being like, wow, I could accomplish so much if I didn't drink, but like I would never not drink ever again. Like that'd just be so unrealistic, that whole kind of like limiting beliefs and our programming around alcohol and thinking that like it must be a part of a real fulfilling life or it's gonna be.
That is such a smart, that's such a brainy way of saying it. I think in my mind it was always, this is the only way I can get through the pain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't even think I consciously knew I was really self-medicating my unhappiness until after, honestly. I was just kind of living my life and accepting the byproduct of binge drinking and anxiety. And I don't even think I was really aware. I remember too, it's funny because I'm a spiritually girly and I'm into like psychics and all that, mediums and everything. And my mom had this was peak hospitality, peak getting my master's, but peak drinking. And so this may be like a few years before I decided to like give it up altogether. And I remember my mom had a family medium come to talk to us, and she did like a group reading. And she came to me. Meanwhile, it's just so funny because I was like, couldn't stop crying during this session. And it's like, you look back and like, I'm happy, but it's like, you're not happy. And she said, like, you haven't been happy for a long time. And I'm like, hmm. And I almost remember feeling slightly like offended or just like, oh, that's weird. Or like, I felt triggered, kind of. And looking back, like, damn, she was so right. I was so unhappy with myself. I knew I wasn't living in alignment with the life I wanted to create, even though it was what everyone else was doing and whatnot. So, anyways, I did a couple dry months through my functional medicine and nutrition program. I graduated in 2019, and then in 2020, the pandemic hit. I was drinking pretty heavily at the beginning, and I decided that instead of giving up alcohol, I thought, oh, I'll deal with this imposter syndrome by like going to get another certification that legitimizes me as like a health and wellness professional.
You were running.
Yeah, I was for like my whole life. And so, yeah, so then when I started that program, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna take this time to really like get serious about doing this and take a break from alcohol, just an experimental one alongside this holistic health coaching program. So that's what I did, and the rest is history. But there was a lot of work after that. So
What does some of that work look like?
well, I guess initially it was honoring the inward, honoring the hermit stage, learning that, I needed to be able to sit with uncomfortable emotions, and I just kind of let them surface. And I did honor that time. We actually just had moved and bought our house in Ipswich in 2020. So it was like this weird convergence of factors with moving to a new location. I took the leap of faith and quit my waitressing job and was like, now's the time I'm gonna move ahead with like health and wellness. I stopped drinking. Um, so this like strange convergence of factors that like seemed to kind of support me taking that leap at that time. And so gave myself permission to just like back away from some relationships and just be with myself. Other work from there was it was like a slow unfolding of like supporting myself physically and really building healthy physical habits that made me feel good in my body and continued to like build momentum for me to maintain being alcohol free. But it also was doing inner child work and looking at my unmet needs and blind spots and really exploring my belief systems around and programming, not just around alcohol. For me, starting to explore my programming around alcohol was like this spiritual awakening because I started to realize, like, wow, I have a lot of beliefs, not just around alcohol, that I've actually never even looked at or explored why I have them or where they came from and how they're dictating my reality. And that I think is huge.
This is very timely for me because I just wrote something on my beliefs on spirituality. I'm kind of curious, how would you identify those spiritual beliefs?
So for me, I think I always encourage my clients to explore what this is because to me, it's kind of two things. It's a connection to something greater than ourselves, but it's also creating a life that is meaningful, purposeful, and impactful, leaving the world better than you found it. Finding out what your unique gifts are that you have to offer the world. So I think it's this co-creation of being in inner alignment with yourself and then surrendering to whatever your higher powers are. And I think sometimes surrender gets this like bad rap that it's like feels like oppressive, the
Not for
word.
me.
But for me, it's like surrender doesn't mean like giving up. It means like faith and having faith that like when your inner landscape is in alignment, then everything else just flows effortlessly from that. Like the universe, God, whatever your higher like beliefs are. But I don't really view religion as like a necessary part of spirituality, although I know that's kind of a construct that works for a lot of people.
I, I think they can be together, but they don't have to be there.
Yeah, I
Religion
think,
is an order.
yeah.
Spirituality is something you feel inside you.
Yeah, I think spirituality doesn't have to be religious, but I do think religion is spiritual. And so some people meet the needs of their spiritual health and hygiene through religion, and other
Yeah.
people do through nature or a deeper connection to like their creativity, intuition, and inner guidance. And I do feel that there is some element of connection to something greater than ourselves, though. This interconnected and this higher intelligence that we are all connected to and to each other. And it's an ecosystem that I believe we're all participating in. And so then the more in alignment we are, and the more we can identify what makes our life meaningful and purposeful, the more we can contribute to the ecosystem in a positive way. And I do think that was a big part of why I self-medicated and binge drank with alcohols, because on a spiritual level, I really knew I had like more to offer the world, and I knew I wanted to create a life of deeper meaning and purpose, and I really didn't know how to do that. And I was not doing it at all, and I was really unhappy on a spiritual level because of that. And I kind of self-medicated to procrastinate.
It feels like, and just this is a revelation to me, but you just saying this, I can hear this honest connection to the spiritual force that you have. And it seems like alcohol was your shield from it. It's
Mm.
like the drinking was almost a purposeful, I do feel it, and therefore I'm going to drink, and it's going to stay at bay, and I'm going
Yeah,
to take control of this all. I can
yeah,
really relate to that feeling.
yeah. It's almost this reluctance to really step into your power and take full ownership of it and be who you were meant to be.
Hmm?
I think a lot of people are really, there's a fear of failure, but there's also a fear of success. And I think that one doesn't get talked about as much. And, I think I also was in groups of people that were operating at the same level I was, which was a lot of drinking, a lot of judgment of other people, and that really infiltrated my psyche and perpetuated a lot of self-doubt within me, because I was in circles of people that just they weren't they weren't
You
uplifting.
you just posted something on TikTok where I'm going to paraphrase there, but you mentioned something about people who are healthy get excited when you're successful. I'm
Yeah,
paraphrasing. Good people will find the joy in your success. And I don't know if you said this explicitly, but people who are not worth it will kind of piss all over your success.
yeah.
That
I
really connected to me.
Yeah, I think I said something like people who are happy want other people to be happy. People who love themselves want other people to love themselves. People who have passionate lives want other people to build the same. And people who don't. And
And hurt
I was,
people hurt people.
yeah, exactly yeah, you wrote that. And so I think a lot of times we don't realize how powerful that, you know, those circles can be in terms of like
Mm-hmm.
how we feel about ourselves when you're around people who are constantly like judging people for putting themselves out there and chasing their dreams. Then you're like, oh yeah, that's dumb. Who do they think they are? That kind of thing. I take full ownership of that, because that's where I was. That's what I was attracting. So I'm not finger pointing, at anybody but myself. And the life I had created was unsupportive to the person I wanted to be. And because of that, I think I leaned into alcohol a lot, and I used it to numb the pain of living an unfulfilling life. I used it to numb the pain of being out of alignment, living well beneath my potential. I used it because it was habitual. I used it because I was psychologically dependent on it. I used it because I saw the drinking patterns that were killing me and my spirit on the inside around me at all times, normalized continuously. So I was dying inside, but I'm like, everyone else is doing it. And so I think that was another part of the inner work is like, and the work wasn't just,
It's not abnormal if everybody around you is doing the same thing.
yeah, and realizing like doesn't fucking matter what anyone else is doing. What the biggest part of like healing for me has been stepping into no comparison. Like this is being measured against my integrity, everything I do, because I have to figure out like we are all individual beings and I have to figure out, and that's one thing I talk a lot about with high sensitivity is, we're all different. We all are wired differently. And I think a lot of people don't even know that they're highly sensitive or deep healers.
I know I'm highly sensitive.
Yeah.
From even a young age, I'm empathetic and I'm highly sensitive. I was watching, I'm going somewhere with this, but I was watching the SNL 50 on Sunday night. And I grew up watching the Dana Carvey years and Chris Farley and Norm Macdonald, and that was formative of the 80s and 90s. And Sandler sang his song about 50 years. And I swear I have watched that every single time. And when he starts talking about Phil Hartman and Chris Farley and Norm Macdonald, I cry every single time. And I realize it's as much as I adored Norm and Farley and Hartman, it more was about me and those times. Like the joy I had from those performers reminds me to a link of the past where I was during that time, because they're not with us anymore, especially how all three of them died in different ways, but tragic in different ways. And how much I love Norm Macdonald. Of the three of them, I love the most. And it's just like that unfairness and yet feeling of where I was. And a lot of it was unhappiness, but the joy that they brought in those times.
Yeah.
And I think it's not, I'm crying because I missed them, because I never knew them. It's that there's that time in my life that is gone.
Yeah, and it's almost like this remembrance of old versions of you, and you've kind of come to the other side. And I don't know if you resonate to this, but it's kind of this like, almost sounds like a feeling of gratitude, like tears of like, wow, like overwhelming emotion around the fact that's like, I overcame like the person I was that when I really like was into these people and they actually like kind of didn't overcome. And that could have been, the situation. And it is so cool to look back and have so much deep appreciation for your ability, like in that old version of yourself, to have the wherewithal to change with the limited knowledge you have at the time. You have no evidence that your life is going to be drastically better. You just know, like, I don't want to go on like this anymore. But so many people just do. And so many people just live even mediocre lives. Maybe they're not full-blown addicts or struggling with addiction, but they could still be living like the most subpar version of their lives, and they just go their whole lives like that. And that is what I think about. Like, what if I went my whole life just living the way I was living? I'm so grateful that I had the courage to step into the unknown and just like take a chance on sober curiosity and be like, let's just see what happens here.
Yeah, I think about it this way as well. If you're living that type of mediocre life, who are you helping? If you can push yourself, what lives can you impact beyond your own? To me, that's the most important thing. That's where you live life after death, is if you've touched somebody else in a positive way. And it doesn't mean you have to raise $1 billion and get mosquito nets for Africa. It could be you said a kind word to the cashier who you don't see is dying on the inside, and you were the one person who was nice to her. I think about that stuff all the time of I want to make an impact on somebody else in a positive way. And the way I was going, I wasn't going to do that. And I hear you with coaching and doing your podcast and social media, even when you're just having fun, bringing that message where the not sober you is not going to help those people. Maybe you're doing therapy, maybe you're doing coaching, but it's not going to be at the same level. It's going to be academic, but without genuine emotion. And now, because you have gone through the pain that they have, there's an empathy there that you can bring to them, or it causes you to be more authentic.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, turning pain into purpose is how so many coaches and therapists and people, but to your point as well, like people can feel when you're embodied. People can feel when you're in your joy or when you're just saying, and I think that's kind of what I think of when you say, like, oh, even the ones where you're just silly. It's like, I could never get to a point of being confident, being silly, and just to the point I'm at now had I not stopped drinking. Like, no way. I would never have the courage to put myself out there and to just be like, I felt like I was living a double life. And it's like putting yourself out there on social media is already hard enough if you're trying to portray, and like just in terms of like fear of judgment and gathering the courage to put yourself out there and share your message. But if you're not in alignment with what you're sharing, it's even more of like, I couldn't have done it. I just couldn't have. And so, and that, like, even when I'm not talking about sobriety, or I'm just kind of trying to be funny or whatever, that joy and that confidence and that comfortability in my own skin, like that grew from having the courage to give up alcohol.
Nice. Where can we find you? So you have coaching, you have your podcast. Where can we find you if somebody qualifies as a lady who's sober curious? Where would they get a hold of you?
Well, on TikTok. I am on TikTok and Instagram at mindful.constitution. I have my website, www.mindfulconstitution.com. And yeah, those are all the places. You want my LinkedIn? No, I'm just kidding.
LinkedIn's a whole different thing.
I know. So yeah, those are the main places. My website, my TikTok, my Instagram. Both handles are the same, mindful.constitution and mindfulconstitution.com.
And you're on Spotify. You do a podcast.
Yeah, my podcast is on, the Mindful Constitution podcast is on Spotify and on YouTube. And so I talk a lot about sober curiosity on there, but I also talk a lot about personal development, holistic health, free thinking, and, just digging into more challenging topics and goings on in the world. I think, hard discussions about big topics are nice to be able to hold space for those, especially with like how polarizing and polarized the world can be at times. I find like I really hope to create spaces where people can like share across differing opinions as well. Like that's exciting to me to help the world evolve their communication.
This is a great area of stress for me, this polarization that I allude to on this show all the time, that it bothers me that empathy is in short supply, that the quickest dopamine hit is sharing hate and dunking on each other. And you don't get that by being thoughtful and empathetic short term. But I'm of a belief it will come back around again because it's not natural. It's not what we naturally gravitate. I think this is why Oprah became popular, because of her message became one of healing and positivity, of this is what can happen. And that became that brand made her a billionaire, because it's not, I think, how we naturally think. So you're attracted to that thing that feels radically different than what's in my life. And I would rather live in that place than the place we are in now.
Yeah, yeah, it's just it seems like we're almost regressing in our ability to
We
really
are.
communicate, even when you think of like the political landscape. It's like I talk to, you know, my mom's generation. It's like people could talk about being of differing political beliefs like at dinner, and shoot the shit about it and just be like, yeah, like anyways, like on to other things. It's like, yeah, this is like I'm a Republican, you're a Democrat. Now it's like you can't talk about it. You're not invited to the dinner. And
Get
like,
into a
it's just,
fight.
yeah, it's just like we should, I think most people are pretty reasonable. And so, yeah, I think, this sober curiosity is what like inspired me to be like, what kind of impact do I want to have? And like, what's really going to support me being the human I want to be without alcohol? And so, yeah, and I love helping other people, not just take out alcohol, but to also be the person they can be without it. Like, figure out what they're passionate about, figure out how, like, they can feel so amazing in their bodies when they can really like consistently stay aligned with their health goals, how they can feel when they deal with some of their trauma and wounds and evaluate their belief systems and mindset. It's like for me, it's all about optimization and this idea. One woman who I had on my podcast she wrote like a book about mommy wine culture, and it's called "It's Not About Not About the Wine," but she said, it's not deprivation, it's liberation. And I feel like that's so true, and I wish more people knew that.
I
Like,
agree. I think I heard that episode. That one
yeah,
rings a bell. That's the one I
Celeste
dialed into.
Yvonne, she's great. She wrote "It's Not About the Wine," and talks about like systemically the culture around mommy wine culture and for women in
Yeah.
general. And it's so true. We think that it's taking something away, which it is, but it's also like granting us so much more. And you can't even articulate like how your mindset, beliefs, physical being, spiritual connection, like you don't even understand how it's going to transform until you go through it and get to the other side. And that is where faith and surrender are so important, because you don't know what you don't know, but you do know that you're miserable where you are, or that like you have this nudge that life could be better. You have this feeling that like alcohol could be holding you back. You think maybe like my life is actually meant to be something more than this assembly line of what we're told to expect and self-medication every day, get your job, go have your couple glasses of wine every day to check out. Maybe there's more to life than that.
Yeah.
And giving yourself permission to explore without any evidence of how it will be successful for you is the greatest gift, at least for me.
That's awesome. Katie, thank you so much for sharing your story.
Yeah.
I think women are underserved in the sober curious world, and we want to give somebody else to identify with. And make sure you go on TikTok and Instagram and follow Katie and check out her podcast. All right, everybody. We will see you next week. Bye, everybody.
Bye.